Thank you, Alex. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Tez, for this fantastic presentation. So I'm going to jump into my talk now. My name is Piero. I'm a data designer. And in this talk, I'll take you through a quick journey across Africa and the Middle East. And we'll discover how we can use data visualization to help address some of the challenges that countries in the global south face. But first, let me give you a bit of background. So when I started working in DataViz more than 15 years ago now, wow, I thought I'd be making lots of cool data art images like this beautiful artwork, or also like the artwork that is just showed. But I didn't design this, people did. However, more and more often client called on me to work on other types of projects, from dashboards to data-driven websites. And there's nothing wrong with doing dashboards, but as a designer, I wasn't always feeling inspired to sort of draw pie charts in boxes. However, there's something that fascinated me, something like the usability aspect, thinking about the user interface, or try to solve problems about accessibility, or giving tools to people that they could use. So overall, more and more over time, my work moved into creating not necessarily dashboard, but data-driven tools that people could use rather than data visualizations that people could simply look at. And today, the focus of my work is really centered around helping organizations, mostly those that operate in the global south, using data visualizations and digital design to tackle social, political...
Piero, sorry for interruption.
Yeah.
We still see your cover slide.
Really?
Are you scrolling something or?
No.
Well, okay.
What slide do you see at the moment?
Today is the focus of my work, but before there was only first
okay
slide.
Okay. So you now are on the correct slide, right? If I flick back, do you see a different slide? I just want to double check that. If I flick through slides, you guys see different slides. It's not.
No, nothing changes.
Okay, strange. But if I do it now, it works.
No. Now it works.
Okay, I see. Okay. So right now you see my screen and you see my slides.
Yeah.
Let me just stop sharing and I'll do it again. I want to make sure that. So right now, do you see me flicking through slides or do you see a single slide?
I see a black screen.
What about now?
Now, slide about you.
Okay.
Same.
And sorry, just one more time. If you now, tell me if you see my slides changing. They're changing.
It's changing.
Awesome. Okay, now we can go on. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was telling you about my work. So let me start from here. I work with partners like Code for Africa, Data for Change, and other organizations like the London School of Economics and the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. And I'm called to help them to create visually engaging data stories and data-driven tools. As you can see from the example here, some of the work I do is also connected to design of very specific types of tools, like this COVID-19 outbreak dashboard in Africa that includes vulnerability index across countries like Kenya and other indicators that are normally useful for researchers, for journalists, and other even citizens that want to know in more detail how the region is prepared to fight an epidemic outbreak. Okay, and now it's time to tell you a little bit about me. As you've seen already from this slide, I said that I'm a data designer and that I'm specialized in infographic storytelling, UX UI, and data visualization. And now I'm based in Amsterdam. I have quite a few years of experience working in various agencies in the UK. I used to live there before, but I've also worked for US, African, and European-based companies. I've also kickstarted a few projects in the world of DataViz, such as an independent magazine called Market Cafe Magazine. And small parenthesis, this is the first time that I'm on stage with Tiziana, who is the other co-founder of the magazine. And we're both here not to talk about the magazine, but of different projects. So shout out to Tiziana for being there on stage with me today. And then a few other things like a data rave meetup in London and a data conference called ENCODE. So another shout out to Alex, because I know the pains that go through organizing conferences. So well done for doing this one. And now about my background. So my background as a designer is in digital and editorial data visualization. In my previous experience, I've worked in London-based studios like Information is Beautiful, Signal Noise, and Bjork Words. And I had the chance to work on some really cool and compelling data visualizations for various brands and for corporate clients as well. And over the years, as probably many of the designers in the room today, I had to adapt my work to the technology and the tools that are available, which means that I've moved more and more from static visualizations into the field of interactive and dynamic data viz, which is it's very exciting because it gives more ways for the user to engage with the visualizations. And now let's go to today. I've talked about the Global South and the fact that I work for organizations like Code for Africa. And what this has taught me, it's a useful lesson, which is that data-driven tools can empower citizens and often can help fight misinformation, which is something that if you heard already someone saying this today, it's true, because Trisha from Code for Africa, who you might have heard the talk this morning, have said these exact words. But what does empowering citizens really mean? Well, from what I understand, when the data can be understood and harnessed by a larger portion of the society with tools that are open and democratic, then everybody wins. Then skills like information design and UI design could be used all together to create platforms and products that enable informed decision-making, improving governance, and enforce accountability towards politicians and governments. So what I'm going to tell you today is this. I'm going to share with you 3 takeaways and 1 pitfall from working with the Global South as a data viz designer and as a UI designer. Are you ready? Let's go. The first takeaway is turning challenges into opportunities. For example, when the data that you have collected is broken or it's incomplete or it's simply unusable, then you could make your goal to collect better data. And sometimes you might have to build a website that does exactly that. Let me give you an example. I'll share with you a project that I worked on as part of a Data for Change workshop in Uganda, which we named I Am Binadamu. And it means in Swahili, I am human. The brief here was to leverage existing survey data to create a campaign to help a non-government organization or NGO to support LGBTQ advocacy and protect gay rights in Tanzania. And for those of you in the audience who may not know, homosexual acts are illegal in Tanzania. So many gay, lesbian, and transgender people are forced to hide their sexuality. During the workshop, me and the small team I worked with, we faced the first challenging issue with the data. A survey was handed out to 100 anonymous respondents in Tanzania, but despite a rich variety in those responses, the data collected was inconsistent. For example, questions were open, the answers were in a mix of languages, and the categories were all over the place. It wasn't, unfortunately, the questionnaire wasn't designed with the data analysis mindset, and that forced us to change the scope of the project. It was still possible to leverage data from some of the questions, and it allowed me to experiment with some infographics that were tackling questions like, Do you feel that other people have excluded you because of your sexual orientation and gender identity? And you can see that it was divided into 2 categories. Or distribution results like who has discriminated against you because of your sexual orientation. These are difficult questions, especially in a country where homosexuality is still seen as a borderline crime by many sectors of society. Note here, for example, how landlords and health personnel stand out alongside less surprising bubbles like that of the police. So to invite our audience to fill in the new questionnaire, which was placed at the bottom of this new website, we came up with an awareness campaign that will send a positive message of solidarity. We created 2 fictional characters by the name of Manka and Mashaka, and were built on persona based on the data that we collected. And we follow their journey as they share their feelings. The website is a simple, but it's an effective experience of storytelling, which means you just scroll and you cycle through different dynamic sections of the site while graphics all around change. In this way, using illustration to talk about a difficult topic allowed us to create a stronger bond with our audience, making experience feel more personal and more intimate, even when talking about difficult subjects like loneliness and persecution. As the characters progress their journey, the user learns about best integration practices within the community before then being invited in a gentle way to share their data anonymously. The campaign went viral. The NGO collected a lot of new subscribers on their WhatsApp group, which is their main way to communicate with different people from the country. And the project even won a shorthand award. So although there's not clear ways to measure impacts on projects like this, especially for the anonymity of the project, there was certainly good responses from the audience. I'm going to move into takeaway number 2, which is about making the data visualization more usable and more actionable. If you're working on a data or a digital tool like a dashboard, you want to give some very practical uses for your audience so that they can extract real value from those tools. And since we're talking about practical use cases, yes, I'm going to give you some examples. I'll share a few projects that I worked with Code for Africa that try to demonstrate that point. Code for Africa, like Tricia said earlier, uses civic technology and data to empower citizens, and it's an organization at the forefront of creating open source tools that help people taking control of their data with technological solutions and user-friendly interfaces. I worked at Code for Africa for over 2 years as a lead designer, and in that time, I've helped the organization to transform their tools with approachable UI and easy-to-use data viz. So the first project I'll show you is this tool I designed with CFA called Promise Tracker. It's a tool for citizens of Kenya to monitor and hold public officials accountable. It also works as a repository of promise made by politicians in power and offer ways to visualize, to track, and to follow these promises to see if the politicians are sticking to their pledges and their promises. Another project that I want to share with you is this extensive redesign of the website of the National Statistics Bureau of Nigeria. The goal of this project specifically was rethinking the way census data was displayed and was presented to the users, focusing on the clarity and the legibility and enabling exploration of data, but at the same time wanted to keep things simple and easy for all different levels of data literacy. The new landing page of the National Statistics Bureau is now composed of modular charts, giving a clean and easy-to-read overview to a broader audience that might not be very data savvy, and is just looking maybe for a quick update on a particular data set. For example, here, users could explore population maps, GDP distribution across sectors, or inflation line graphs, all from the modules in the landing page, before they can drill down into more detailed tables and information. And the last example of data-driven tool that afford usability to African citizens is a tool that's called Pesa Yetu. And yes, you've heard about it already from Tricia, but I'm going to tell you just a little bit about it from a design point of view. You already know that it means our money in Swahili, and the subtitle of this is called Our County, Our Responsibility. This platform helps users to explore and compare data about public budget spending in Kenya across counties and municipalities. But just to give you a very quick demo, Pesa Yetu allows users to select county, municipality in Kenya and explore dozens of data sets and database on budget spending and constituency features. Users, as you can see from the screen on the right, can also pin and compare different municipalities, basically creating a split screen across the two. And the data on the platform has a lot of detailed categories. It includes information on land use, on infrastructure, and even livestock farming, for example. Now, let's move to the third takeaway, which is about encouraging granular exploration of your data stories. So sometimes you might have a lot of data you want to show your audience. How can you introduce large data outcomes to your audience gradually? For example, you can show the tip of the iceberg first, and then you give them the tools to go deeper and to explore. And you guessed it, I have a new project to show you. And I'm very excited to show you this one because it's the first time that I present it in public. We only finished wrapping up the development before Christmas, and it's now live. So it's the first time that I present the behind the scenes of this. So in April last year, I was contacted by Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, which is a research group based in London. And they invited me to help create an interactive data visualization that will show data from a new large research that they conducted on the people living in various countries in the Middle East. The brief was to create a visual essay showcasing a polling of the Middle Eastern perception of the region to challenge the idea that there's no liberal thinking in that region. The research was based on a polling on people living in Iran, Egypt, Lebanon, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Palestine. The questions ranged widely from things like, what's your situation compared to your parents' generation? To questions like, do you agree women should have all the same rights as men to apply for employment at all levels in government or business? And several other questions ranging from employment, religion, economy, education, just to name a few. Another slightly challenging aspect of this project was to deal with the huge body of text that this research has produced. Normally, you can imagine this type of research delivered as a large PDF. So not only we needed to break the content in smaller chapters, but each chapter had to be divided into even smaller chunks, paired with respective data visualization so that it could work in a digital and dynamic format. And now we've get to the core of this takeaway, the granularity aspect. The analysis of the data showed that while it was great to look at the aggregated sample for each of the questions as an overview of the population response, it was also interesting to look at the sub-demographic of this response. For example, looking at different age groups often gave a much more nuanced picture of people's choices. So with the help of a developer that I invited to the team, Sergio Galan, we began experimenting with a few different ways to allow users to play with disaggregation filters to allow easy switching between big picture view and granular zoomed in view of the disaggregation. I also experimented with lots of different chart types, either custom made or based on existing libraries. We mostly leaned on bubble charts, matrix charts, and some very wonky charts like something called Voronoi tree map in the shape of octagons. I'll show you later. We've also looked for smooth ways to combine interactivity with animation so that the transformation of the chart devices will look seamless while the user scrolls or filter. And during lots of this conversation with the team, I look at different sources of inspirations too. Inspiration that resonated with Middle Eastern cultural heritage. And one of the themes that stood out was this concept of the Penrose tiling, which is a geometric pattern often found in old Islamic art, mosaics, and traditional Giri patterns. The resulting set of visuals combined elements from the geometric tiling that I just mentioned you with modern and minimalistic shapes that compose the charts and graphic elements of the website. Since one of the underlying messages of the research was that the surveyed sample showed to be a lot more progressive, pragmatic, and liberal than expectations showed, the idea was to show a more contemporary side of the Middle Eastern society, which also matched with the project title, which is The Changing Face of the New Middle East. Alongside the deliverables for the website, I've also created short animations and combined into a sizzle reel to promote the share the launch of the website. And this is also a great way to view some of the charts as a standalone piece. Animation allowed me to show some of the insight that would be otherwise hidden behind some filters, like this insight on tech education being particularly relevant in Tunisia. Or an animation was also a good way to invite users to explore and discover their own insight, like this 4-quadrant polar chart on the right-hand side of your screen at the moment, showing what does the Middle East think of other countries, and highlighting a single sample, in this case, the US. And here's some stills from the website showing the chapter breakers, the layout, and the navigation system. The structure always keeps the text on one side and the charts on the other side, so that as the user scrolls, the reading experience is uninterrupted. Lots of charts have a filter that allows users to drill into a single country once they've looked at the overview of the data. And here you can see in motion the introductory scrolling animation from the landing section into the first chapter. Or the filtering system. Users, for example, can choose one of the 6 countries and drill into one of the sub-demographics. And here it is. Just to recap, these were the 3 takeaways. So turning challenges into opportunities, making DataViz usable and actionable, and when possible, encourage granular exploration. Okay, but before I go, I mentioned there's also a pitfall, and I want to leave you with this final takeaway. It's so-called designer as a colonizer. This is a very delicate subject, and it's about thinking of your role as a designer and the broader context around you, especially when you step into social contexts that you're not familiar with. So remind yourself to think of your role as a facilitator of methodologies and processes. The final outcome should never be an imposed solution. It should be a group effort. Let me read this to you. Power and its politics and hierarchies exist everywhere, in every conversation we have, in every deal we make, in every face we kiss. This is an extract from the book of Politics of Design written by Ruben Pater, and this is a sentence that Barbara Kruger said. This means that we should always be aware, even when we mean no harm, that our identity and our background carries political weight and power structures that are beyond ourselves. This is something relevant in the design context, and it's not just today, it's not a new thing. Take the example of the isotype, which is a famous infographic language that was invented by Otto Neurath in the 1930s. It was regarded as objective and neutral, but it's not necessarily true. It simply meant that it represented European colonist standards of the time. And I'm going to bring it back to my case personally. With regards to my work, I'm conscious of my role as well. As a white European male designer living in one of the countries of the global north, I cannot ignore the cultural and political implication of my background too, even more so when I'm jumping into very different contexts of the global south to help teams to design websites or make suggestions on how some design should look like for audience that often I know very little of. So what is the solution to this? Is it simply to not intervene and every designer should stick in their own context? I don't have a solution that fits for all scenarios, of course, but I've worked out an approach that fits to me. And normally when I start a new project, I do it by walking on my toes. I assume nothing and I ask many questions. I learned about context by making new connections, getting in one-to-one conversations, and engaging with larger groups in brainstorms and review. If you step into situations like this, also try to be humble and keep learning from others while sharing any useful lessons and experience with your team. As a freelancer, I admit that I've been super lucky to work with many different teams, often remotely, of course, but in some instances also in person. As you can see from pictures from those two workshops that were held in Lebanon and Uganda by the amazing folk at Data for Change. And I hope that I can continue to do so because for me, meeting great people and collaborating together is one of the most enriching experience in this journey as a designer. Thank you very much. I'm gonna have a look if there's any question now.
Thank you very much, Piero.
Thanks, Alex.
Yes, it's very inspiring. There was some questions. What kind of data did you use for the promise tracker?
This is a very good question. So this being a project connected to Code for Africa, if you witnessed the talk from Trisha, you might have heard a little bit about the structure of the organization. Code for Africa has a data lab, and part of the data lab is to collect and scrape data. So with regards to Promise Tracker, there's already an existing repository of promises that is manually scraped down and collected into a database by a number of analysts. They keep monitoring them, updating them, and dividing them into categories. So of course, there's a lot of manual processes in terms of deciding how the structure of those categories should work. I didn't collect them myself, but I have many conversations with the people that collect them because I wanted to ask the same question to them.
Okay, and the next question, how do you choose the type of the chart for the information you have?
That's a good question, and I'm sure this question will come up in the panel debate that we'll have later. When it comes to choosing the chart, that is, in my process, that is a question that I ask myself quite a bit later in the process. Before I ask what type of chart, I'm going to ask a lot of questions about what is the story that we're trying to tell. And before even we get to the chart, I guess the question really is, what is the data telling us? Is it telling us a story about distribution? Is it telling us a story about relationships or comparisons? Once I know a little bit about that, then I can actually start to ask, now that I know the function and maybe the family of charts that could be connected to, then I jump into sketching. And in the sketching phase, I sketch with many different chart types until I try something that really works.
And another one in the same direction, what are your recommendations for visualizing topics like politics and social activism, which are mainly qualitative?
I like this question. I like this question because trying to visualize politics is also a passion of mine. I have a master's degree in politics myself, although I never pursued that career. But definitely the first project in data visualization I've ever worked on during my design graduation was visualizing the whole body of United Nations resolutions of the Security Council. So it was very political. And like you mentioned in the question, it was more about qualitative information than quantitative. So if you're facing something like a political and social topic, first of all, chances are that numbers are there, but of course you need to collect them. Then it's about how you slice and dice those stories. There might be categories that you haven't thought of. There might be different ways these topics affect different groups of people. And if, by all means, if there is no number, it's more about a process or a flow chart, there's many different ways to visualize political topics that have no numbers and it's simply qualitative data.
Thank you, Piero. I will also ask you to answer the rest questions via chat, because we need to invite next speaker. And again, so thank you again that you focus us on questions that we need to answer before we choose any chart. And really, we need to find the purpose of our analytics and visualization.
Thank you, Alex.
Let me introduce our next speaker, Jacopo Ottaviani. Hi, Copa.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Alex.
I'm glad to see you and give you your word.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thanks for having me on this fantastic event. I'm just speechless after the presentations by Piero and Tiziana. I think they were amazing. So I'll try my best to, match them and complement them with other information about data journalism. So I'll try to share my screen. Well, I think, yeah, I'll be right back because Zoom is now updating. I'll be soon there again. 1 sec.
Okay. So if you're reconnecting, we may continue our Q&A session with Piero. After your job with Code for Africa, have you another project in Africa?
Hey, yes, I'm back on. Yes, first of all, my collaboration with Code for Africa, I hope, is not finished. I think I'm still in the extended network, but of course, I'm now working with a few different partners. I'm working on a project. I cannot reveal much, but it's very interesting. It's about gender domestic violence, and it's specifically related to the Cabo Verde Islands. I cannot really reveal any more information, but I hope we're going to publish this project very soon, in maybe Q2.